My husband said, "You're nothing without me." Now I wake up every morning proving him right. I am a woman of 32. The night he told me that I was nothing without him, the apartment did not argue. It swallowed the words and handed them back to me in the sound of the refrigerator and the thin clink of cutlery as I stacked plates I had washed. He said that sentence like someone reading a label he believed fit. I felt the air change temperature inside my chest. I finished drying a glass and set it down because hands need tasks when dignity is being counted out loud. It did not begin there, it began with small redefinitions that looked like help. He said that he would manage the rent because math stressed me. He said that he would handle the car because mechanics cheat women. He said that he would talk to my manager when my hours changed because I did not know how to negotiate. He called up protection. I called up partnership. I did not notice how often I apologized for things that belonged to both of us: late fees, broken bulbs, a fridge that froze lettuce. He said that mistakes have owners, and the owner was usually me. When we met, I was steady the way people become when they keep promises to their younger self. I worked at a small printing shop and took night classes in bookkeeping. He was louder, a man with plans that could fit only inside a story. He liked that I remembered details and moved through rooms without asking to be seen. He said that I made life easy. I heard admiration and missed the warning. People who love ease often grow resentful of the hands that do the smoothing. We married quickly. He said that momentum protects love. I believed him because I had seen couples drown in long engagements and paperwork. At first it was simple. We found a routine that looked like fairness when you measured it in hours. I cooked, he drove, I paid utilities, he paid rent, I did laundry, he fixed the sink. But time does not measure only in hours. It measures in who is allowed to be tired and who must be understanding. He came home late and spread his day across the couch like a map. I stacked mine on a shelf and told myself it was smaller. Money turned into a language I did not speak fluently enough to argue in. He said that he had bigger vision and that big decisions needed big shoulders. He said that we were a team and that his plan required temporary sacrifices that would pay off in a year. The year stretched into 2. When I asked to see the plan, he said that trust means letting someone lead without checking the map every mile. I nodded because I had been raised to confuse grace with silence. At the print shop, my hours increased. I learned to price rush jobs without blinking. I learned to say no to clients who believed deadlines were suggestions. I studied for my final bookkeeping exam at lunch on a stool by the laminator. I passed. I came home with a certificate rolled inside a rubber band. He left it on the table for a week under junk mail. He said later that he had been proud but busy. Pride that requires translation does not feed anyone. Control does not enter a home with sirens. It slides in wearing help. He offered to consolidate our accounts to streamline. He suggested we put my pay into a joint account he managed to simplify. He proposed that he keep both sets of car keys because I was always misplacing mine. I agreed to the first 2 and said no to the keys. He said that my distrust disappointed him. I handed him the keys because disappointment, said gently enough, can sound like moral authority. I began checking with him before I bought small things, not because we lacked money, but because I had been trained by his raised eyebrow to pre-approve my life. He said that he admired restraint. He also said that if I dressed like the woman he knew I could be, I would be treated differently. I watched him measure me with advice that sounded like love until I wore clothes chosen to avoid his sigh. The first public cut was minor. He told friends that I would be lost without his spreadsheets. They laughed because the joke had rhythm. I laughed too. I always laughed when the joke was about me, at me, for me, because laughter keeps peace for another hour. Later at home he said that I was being sensitive. He said that if I wanted a different story told about me, I should become the kind of woman worth a different story. I packed that line in my throat and carried it to work, where I stopped offering ideas in meetings because I had begun to believe that a wrong idea proved the joke true. I kept a small notebook in my bag for numbers and lists. Items multiplied that would not fit anywhere, things he said I should change, things I had promised to shrink, things I had learned to hide because showing him made conversation heavy. I wrote down how many times he asked about my day and then talked over my answer. I wrote down how often I apologized for asking what our savings goal was. I wrote that love without room to ask questions becomes something else with the same face. He called me ungrateful the day I suggested moving our bills into 2 columns labeled mine and his so I could see more clearly. He said that teams do not divide like that I was inviting division into our home. He said that I wanted to catch him failing. I wanted a diagram. I did not know how to make a diagram for suspicion disguised as stewardship. The sentence arrived after a week of small humiliations that could be named ordinary: a credit card declined in a grocery line because he had forgotten to transfer, a reminder that since he paid rent, I should not complain about the layout of the apartment, a gentle lecture about how the women he knew at work all had edge and that edge is what keeps a man interested. Then he told me that I was nothing without him. He said it as a conclusion, not an insult. I heard a verdict on my entire history. My body went quiet in a way that felt like fainting without black. I did not argue. I cleaned the counter because I needed to touch something that responded to effort in predictable ways. When he went to shower, I pulled my notebook from its place behind the cookbooks and drew 2 lists: what I could control, what I could not. On the first list, I wrote sleep, money I can see, body that moves, work I can measure, people who would lend me a chair if I needed one. On the second list, I wrote his moods, his timelines, his scoreboard. I stared until the columns stopped swimming. I added a third, what I would control anyway if it killed me. I wrote dignity there, in letters that pressed through the page and left dents on the one beneath. Leaving does not begin with bags. It begins with naming. I said out loud into the kitchen that I needed my own account. The room listened like rooms do. The next morning, I told the bank that I wanted a separate checking account because I had started freelancing on weekends and needed clean books. It was true. A neighbor had asked me to keep the books for her flower stand, and word had spread to a barbershop and a small bakery. Cash had begun to collect in a jar on our closet shelf under sweaters. I moved it in one deposit that felt like air returning. I told no one at first because I was not ready to narrate. Narration gives people a job in your story, and I wanted to keep mine. I did tell my sister that I had taken on extra bookkeeping and asked if I could use her address for invoices. She said yes and did not pry. She said that if I ever needed a spare bed, hers squeaked but held. I said that I was fine. She said that fine is a word people use when they are balancing a tray. He noticed nothing until I started holding my spine differently. Abusers are not mind readers, they are pattern readers. The pattern had shifted. I closed the bathroom door when I walked in instead of leaving it half open because he liked to talk to me while I put on lotion. I took a bus to work instead of waiting for him to offer a ride that came with a lecture about traffic. I moved my certificate from under junk mail to the wall above my desk. He said that I had been cold. I said that I had been busy. He said that busyness is how people avoid hard conversations. I said that conversations require 2 people willing to hear each other. He looked at me like he had found a hairline crack in a glass he had considered unbreakable. Control escalates when it senses distance. He began itemizing his contributions with a new zeal. He said that he had pulled me from a smaller life and set me on a path. He said that everything I became would be because he had aimed me. He said that without him I would be a cashier with a notebook and a dream. The insult did not land like it used to. It sounded like a man afraid of storms naming himself a weatherman. I did not stage a dramatic exit. I made an appointment at a community legal clinic and asked questions in a small room with cheap carpet. I learned what belonged to me by law, what belonged to me by decency, and what I might have to walk away from to keep my lungs clear. I packed a small bag at my sister's with 3 outfits, a copy of my certificate, and a thumb drive of scanned documents. I wrote 2 letters, one to my future self promising that the first months would be small and honest, and another to him with 3 sentences only: that I was leaving, that I would not discuss it in person, and that anything necessary could go through a friend who had agreed to serve as a bridge so that our last words to each other would not become weapons. The day I left was uneventful to the eye. I waited for him to leave for the gym he visited when he needed to stage grit. I wrote a final checkmark on my list and placed my key on the counter beside a white mug with a chip that I had loved then learned to hate. I folded the dish towel neatly because I wanted the room to know I had not become him to survive him. I put the letter under the salt shaker. I walked out without taking the plant I had raised from a stem in a glass. I told myself that new rooms have windows too. At my sister's, the bed squeaked, and I slept anyway because exhaustion had numbed me to sounds. I woke before the sun and realized two facts at the same time: no one would ask me to justify how I made coffee, and no one would move my wallet to a safer place without telling me. I cried in a small way that did not ask anyone to hold me. Then I showered, put on clean jeans, and went to work as if the world had not tilted. He called. He left messages that cycled predictably: confusion, anger, lecture, offer, insult, plea. He wrote that I was overreacting and that I had humiliated him by leaving without debate. He wrote that I owed him a conversation as proof that I had ever been a decent spouse. His decency had always required an audience, mine did not. I said nothing. Silence tasted like medicine left too long on the tongue, bitter but healing. At the print shop, my boss asked if I could train a new hire and if I wanted more hours at the desk where invoices live. I said yes because extra hours turn into options later. In the evenings, I kept books for the flower stand, the barber shop, and the bakery. I built a spreadsheet that a neighbor could use on her phone without fear. I charged less than a formal firm and more than a favor. I wrote the numbers in my notebook and watched the total crawl then walk. He sent a carefully written email a week later. He enumerated the bills he had paid in the last year as if debt could retroactively buy respect. He asked for a meeting in a cafe to talk like adults. The legal clinic volunteer had taught me that adults set terms. I wrote back with one line and a forwarding address for official mail. He tried a different tactic. He told mutual friends that I had been unstable and that anxiety had made me irrational. My sister told me this with an expression that asked permission to slash tires. I told her to let words wear themselves out. In the second week, a quiet settled. Panic tried to enter through the window labeled, "What if you cannot do this?" I kept the window closed by stacking proof on the sill. I had paid my part of the rent at my sister's on time. I had bought groceries with a card that did not belong to him. I had spent 0 minutes defending my choices to a person who enjoyed watching me explain myself. The proof did not make me strong. It made me accurate. Accuracy is sturdier than strength. On Friday night, I walked past a thrift store and bought a lamp with a warm shade. My sister laughed when she saw it because our room already had a light. I said that this one belonged to me and to no argument. She plugged it in. The room changed temperature. We ate rice and eggs and watched a show where no one raised their voice. I slept with the lamp off because I trusted the dark again. That was how my new mornings began, not loud, not triumphant, just steady. I woke early. I made coffee in a pot that did not judge the thickness of the pour. I sat at a small table and wrote one line I would carry through the day: "I am not his label." Then I left for work and practiced being a person whose value did not require a witness. I did not expect the apology. It arrived in the second month, the late-night kind that sounds sincere because the room is quiet. He said that stress had made him cruel and that grief from a childhood he never named had taught him to hoard control and call it love. He said that he had believed I could not survive without him because he could not imagine living with himself without someone to hold his reflection steady. He asked for another chance to practice gentleness. He said we were still a team. I listened once, then played the message again and heard the line underneath: he had not understood that teams require equal oxygen. I did not reply. The legal clinic had taught me a sentence I repeated like a hymn: my silence is not contempt, it is care for my future. I chose care. He cried, according to a mutual friend. He bought a stack of books and highlighted them and announced to anyone within earshot that he was working on himself. Announcements had always been his favorite exercise. Meanwhile, my life did the unglamorous work of mending. I took on 3 more clients who could not afford a full-time bookkeeper but wanted someone to keep them from drowning in receipts. I created simple systems that did not insult their intelligence. I categorized their chaos into containers they could carry. I charged fairly. Money arrived not as a flood but as a stream that never dried. I paid my own phone, my own pass for the bus, my own dentist. I felt a new kind of full. My boss at the print shop called me into the back room with the paper samples. He said that a small architecture firm needed someone part-time to keep their books clean and wondered if I would be interested if the hours could be arranged around the shop. I said that I was interested and that I could prove reliability with references by the end of the day. The firm said yes after one conversation where I talked about reconciliations like recipes. My schedule thickened, my accounts grew, my posture lengthened. I bought a second-hand laptop with my own card and wrote my name on a sticky note inside it, not because I feared theft but because I wanted to see my name with my work. He shifted tactics again and sent a financial spreadsheet labeled Fair Division. It turned our marriage into a ledger where his contributions towered and mine vanished into household. I recognized the trick because I used to organize other people's numbers that way without malice. Names matter. If you call care miscellaneous, it will disappear in every meeting. I did not argue cell by cell. I sent one line: I am not returning to a life where my value needs better formatting to be visible. The line looked plain in the sent folder. Plain felt like power. He found God for 2 weeks and wrote long paragraphs about forgiveness. He found the gym for 3 and posted proof. He found grief and wore it like a coat in July. He found my mother and asked for help. She gave him tea and a blessing each time and told him that blessings are not instructions. He found my sister and received a door closed gently but firmly with a sentence about boundaries delivered in the tone only older siblings can use without causing fire. In the 3rd month, I moved from my sister's squeaky bed into a small studio above a tailor's shop. The walls were thin, the peace was thick. The first night I sat on the floor with takeout containers and the warm lamp and no furniture except a mattress and a folding chair. I felt poor in a way that was honest, not humiliating. I texted my sister a photo of the window and wrote that the light felt like something I had earned. She wrote back that earned light warms more. Work kept me upright. I built a monthly class at the community center for people who wanted to understand budgets without shame. I printed handouts that looked like kindness, big fonts, simple steps, examples that felt like actual lives, not math problems. People came. They said that nobody had ever explained compound interest without trying to sell them something. I started charging a small fee because I had learned that free work is easy to ignore and paid work teaches respect. I used the fee to buy snacks for the next session because money should do multiple jobs when it can. He tried one more time to turn my morning into his mirror. He showed up outside the class and waited on the steps as men do when they want witnesses for penance. He said that he had changed and that we could rebuild if I allowed it. He spoke softly and did not block the doorway, which is a kind of growth. I thanked him for speaking gently. I said that I would not build my life inside his new homework. I said that my mornings were full now. He nodded with tears that belonged to him, not to me. He stepped aside. My students filed past with notebooks and cookies. We all went in. He did not follow. Recovery makes a person less interesting to gossips. No drama. No spectacle. Just rent on time, teeth cleaned, sleep, starch, laughter, and inbox cleared before bed. On Fridays, I stood at the window of my studio and watched the tailor cut clean lines from fabric and thought about how scissors and kindness share a job when used well. Both are tools to remove what does not fit. He cried, people said, when he finally sat with the math of what he had called love. He cried because the person who had softened his days would not pick up the corner again. He cried when dishes piled and he realized that he did not know the rhythm that keeps a home from smelling like surrender. He cried because no one in his new rooms laughed at his jokes about how he had saved a woman from herself. He cried because echoes do not bring water. I did not rejoice. I did not perform mercy either. I let the crying belong to him. The first time I woke and did not think of him before coffee, I celebrated by paying a bill early. The second time, I celebrated by buying fresh flowers from the stand whose books I kept. The third time, I forgot to celebrate because forgetting had become normal. Normal is underrated when you have lived inside a performance. Letters from the clinic kept arriving for community events. I volunteered at 2, taught children how to fold a paper boat, and let their parents ask about budgets between tables of juice. An older woman pressed my hand and said that I had a calm that made her trust her own numbers. I wrote the sentence down and taped it to my cabinet where instructions for boiling eggs live. It became a rule: build a life where calm is work and work is proof. I visited the legal clinic to finalize what needed finality. The file was thinner than I feared. The volunteer smiled and said that speed had been my protector. I had left before cruelty had time to collect evidence. I signed 2 forms and exhaled like a person lifting a heavy box and discovering it was full of paper. Outside, rain began and the city smelled like metal and relief. I did not text anyone. I bought soup and carried it home like a trophy for a race that nobody had clapped for, but that counted anyway. He sent one more message, brief and bare. He wrote that he understood. He wrote that if I ever needed a statement or receipt, he would provide it promptly. He wrote that he was sorry again, without adjectives. I saved that message for a week, then deleted it because I wanted my phone to hold only what I needed to carry. There was no dramatic new love to replace the old pattern, only new patience with myself. I learned how to be alone in a room without mistaking silence for accusation. I learned to name my mornings without consulting anyone. I learned that I prefer porridge to eggs, paper lists to phone apps, early buses to late cars. I learned that I could sit with grief for 10 minutes, then ask it to move so I could iron a shirt. One Sunday, I passed our old building on the way to meet a client. I did not slow. The window I used to clean without thanks had a new plant, thick and glossy. I hoped the plant would survive. I hoped the new person had a lamp they loved. I hoped, if he lived there still, that he had stopped turning labels into law. Hope costs little when you spend it on strangers. People asked if I had forgiven him. I said yes in stages. I said that forgiveness had looked like refusing to rehearse his worst sentence until it became my definition. I said that forgiveness had not required reunion, only accurate memory. I said that I had stopped trying to find a clever way to win and had chosen a quiet way to leave. They nodded like quiet is something you buy, not something you practice. I kept practicing. Now my mornings begin with proof. Not the kind he meant. He said that I was nothing without him. Every day I wake up and become nothing of his, nothing to manage, nothing to correct, nothing to shrink, nothing to parade, nothing to use as cover for fear. I become, instead, someone with a list, with keys, with a lamp that makes a room gentle, with work that helps people stop calling their care miscellaneous. I do small math that adds up to a different kind of enough. I make coffee. I answer email. I straighten the paper boats on my cabinet. I lock the door behind me and carry my bag down the stairs past the tailor cutting cloth with clean, decisive strokes. If I ever hear that he says again that I am nothing without him, I will agree for the first time without any heat. Without him, I am nothing he can name. Nothing he can hold up to a room as proof of his leadership. Nothing he can subtract from to feel large. Without him, I am nobody's label. I am simply a person who wakes early, pays bills, laughs at useful jokes, teaches budgets to people who have been told they are bad with money, visits her mother on Wednesdays, and keeps a warm lamp by the bed. That is what I mean by proof. It is not an argument. It is a routine. It is walking past mirrors that used to ask for his verdict and seeing only myself, uncaptioned. It is choosing simple food and clean books. It is counting the cash drawer at the flower stand while the owner tells me how rain changes tulips. It is opening my notebook each morning and writing one line: be accurate, not afraid. Some days are still heavy. Some nights I wake at 3 and think about the plant I left behind and the girl who watered it while letting herself starve. I let the thought sit on the edge of the bed. Then I get up, turn on the warm lamp, and pour a glass of water. I drink. I breathe in counts of 4. I say a prayer so short it fits between heartbeats. Morning returns. I make coffee. I open the window. The street sounds like a city that has learned nothing from my private war and does not need to. The kettle whistles. The day begins. He cries somewhere, people say, because the one who cushioned his life is gone. My sympathy does not change his room. My steadiness changes mine. I lock my door and walk to the bus stop with a bag full of receipts and a body that belongs only to me. I stand under a sky that requires no permission and practice being nothing of his, every day, on purpose.
Follow me for more stories.